Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event objectives for Taking the Helm event, in which the Commodore Maryka is added to the game. So, this week, of course, we ended up getting a Guild Wars for that of Ghulvania. While we have not had a specific Ghulvania event in any time recently, it has had a couple good things in Soulforge, like the other week where we end up having the Grey King, which is a very, very solid option. But we'll still go over a bunch of teams that can end up covering stuff, even if you're missing some of the more core options, just using lower rarity things. So we'll be going over all the teams for those, and that'll be taking place this Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday main event that we have going on this week. Main thing to note with it too, of course, is if you are a guild leader, don't forget to go and specifically today set whatever defend location you want to go and defend for. If you're anyone else in the guild on Tuesday and Wednesday, don't forget to go set your defends, as you need 27 out of your 30 people in your guild to set up a defend team to be able to get the maximum amount of points whenever your guild ends up winning. And beyond that, actually pretty good reward this time underneath the shiny thing. It is Shiny Crimson Bat, and it seems like it's getting a bleed mechanic on its trait, or on its ability when it ends up reaching tier 2, which is nice because, of course, that wasn't a mechanic back then when it first came out. So that with its 2 lower mana costs honestly makes it better than the Mythic of Dracula's from the Kingdom. While it doesn't get to get as much life, it has more overall true damage for a substantially lower mana cost. Basically half by the time it gets its full shininess. So definitely a pretty good option for more budget teams, as well as if you're not running Grey King, or even with Grey King, just to kind of offset your damage a little bit. So yeah, not that bad at all. And of course, I'll be starting on this Thursday and going until the rest of the week. So definitely make sure to go and do that. With that being said, let's go over all the teams. So World Event Underspire is actually the same because it's just Blackhawk this week. So Blackhawk, very straightforward for the high rarity team. You basically just build around the Ruby. The Ruby weapon is not obtainable this week, even though it is a Blackhawk weapon. It is specifically a Blackhawk weapon that requires 3 different components that you get from other event weeks. However, if you have gotten all 3 of those in the past and you have your million souls to go craft this, it is the strongest true damage hero weapon in the entire game, as well as just one of the top 10 weapons in the game. Deals a bunch of true damage to all enemies, creates 3 booty gems, which gives 10 gold if they end up getting exploded, and then ends up exploding 5 gems, which generally gives you that gold pretty much immediately. Pretty comparable to Leprechaun, but for a weapon, but for damage, in a sense, where you're getting pretty much as a guaranteed amount of mana accumulation and gold every single cast, except this is focused a little bit more on true damage rather than on mana accumulation, while of course having all the perks to be able to run any hero class in the game, with his keys being Corsair. Corsair is really, really good this week. Aside from having 20% extra stats, which makes whatever weapon you're running a lot stronger, it also has +3 blue, +2 from its final trait, and another one from its second to last perk if you end up going that deep. This is very useful because a lot of teams within this location will end up going pretty blue heavy. So you can end up going with something like Sacrax here, where we can end up creating blue. We could choose any color, but you're generally going to be hitting either blue, green, or brown, or in this case blue or brown, and particularly blue, since we are at +5 blue, +2 off a banner, and then +3 off of course, as we mentioned, the Corsair hero class. And while Corsair hero class normally does not have a half mana start, it is a rogue, and of course one nice thing about this location is it has 50% mana start to all rogue allies, so you can end up getting your mana started and getting everything off the ground that way, and you're just good to go. Megavore is mostly just here for a little bit of offset, can kind of eliminate all armor, end up one-shotting something based on all the chip damage you already have, and on top of being able to one-shot, it also literally has a one-shot ability off its final trait, 8% chance to insta-kill every time you take an extra turn. So this would be really nice to be running for both the World Event and for the Underspire this week. Both teams are exactly the same as far as what you'd end up running, and as far as specifically for the World Event, the only thing to really note as far as what room to take is just don't take Night Coronet. As long as you're not taking Night Coronet, you are good to go. So yeah, just avoid Night Coronet when possible, and of course always take the higher rarity ones when available, particularly Megavore, but as long as you just don't take Night Coronet, you should be good to go as far as World Event scoring. And nothing else to really mention here, just the Guild Wars going on this week. Pretty much the only big thing until next week where we have the Halloween event, Vault event, and pretty much everything going on. But this week is pretty much just the Guild Wars there, which will be getting to the teams as soon as we get a little bit lower. Actually, do you guys want me to start covering the Guild War teams immediately on these videos, by the way? I feel like I always cover them, like, at the end, because I just put them at the bottom, but we could cover them a little bit earlier. I just always put them at the bottom of the stack, because I always go, like, World Event and then kind of go down in chronological order, since, of course, that doesn't occur until the later end of the week. But anyways, World Event for the low rarity, we have Scurvy Sea Dog going for Empower, ends up converting green to blue. This is mostly just to feed our mana accumulation. We're doing this into Captain Skullbeard to get everything off the ground. Captain McCall, we're actually using a little bit as damage source here. Does a bunch of damage to an enemy, but if they're already submerged, it does get to insta-kill them. So he can also double cast onto an enemy to also insta-kill them as long as they have not dropped their submerge. So that can also be kind of useful. Beyond that, we're also using the Captain's Cutlass as our main damage source here. We're specifically using the Rogue version. Personally, if I was to go for either the Blackhawk or the Rogue, if you had to choose only one from Guild War this week, I would say Rogue, just because it has some use case outside of Blackhawk, whereas the one that only does it based on Blackhawk allies, of course, can pretty much never be used outside of this event week. So you can kind of go either or, but I would say if you're going to go for only one, go for the Captain's Cutlass, which is why we're showing it here. Both of them have some pretty similar perks. Both of them are pretty useless outside of these kind of events, but there are at least some more use cases for Rogue compared to the other thing. And of course, this is a pure Rogue team, but if you are going pure Blackhawk instead, might want to consider the other one, or even just get both. Overall, weapons are pretty underwhelming in Soulforge, so there's definitely not much competition as far as what you would end up spending a limited amount of resources on. But yeah, pretty standard, just ends up creating blue and red, which of course feeds into all of our mana accumulation to get the rest of the team off the ground. Overall, pretty low amount of damage. Ideally, you would want to offset for one high rarity damage source, but I figured we just keep it on the lower end. One thing that I did do a little bit higher is the Captain McCall for 50%. He is a legend, but he's in event keys this week, so he's pretty easy to go and end up targeting down. As far as the Underworld this week, it is specifically blue and purple restriction. With that being said, we're going a pretty standard quick kill Atlanta team, though you can also go quick kill Rowan. And for the higher rarity team, we're going with just a pretty standard Tesla, using Leprechaun to get it off the ground, Wand of Stars so we can get as well as Mech to get rid of any kind of submerge or anything similar from the opposing team, and Tesla boost berry shooting off all enemy and ally armor, most notably enemy armor, in order to do a ton of damage, and within 2 or 3 casts you should be able to kill pretty much every single battle. As far as the pure faction team, it can be summarized as just use Bile Blackheart. One thing that we do have, well, as far as what he does, he just ends up exploding a bunch of gems and gains a bunch of life, attack, and armor. Pretty much any troop in Underworld that ends up gaining attack and a durability tends to be pretty much unkillable. You just keep casting them over and over again, which is even easier with his Mass Explode. While he does have a pretty high 17 mana cost, his Mass Explode makes up for it, and he just keeps going over and over again, gaining a ton of stats. He ends up getting a little bit more value whenever he explodes too, because he creates 2 Doom Skulls, or he converts 2 Skulls into Doom Skulls. But when those get exploded, it's pretty much a 10 free skull damage every single time. The only reason we have 2 is in case they somehow skull spam down your first one, you'll have a second one ready to go. One thing that's new that we didn't have access to when showing any of the other teams in the past is the Scholar. He's the 5th troop that ended up coming in for the faction. Of course, now we're at the point where we're starting to get the 6th troop for every single faction. However, this one is nice because there wasn't really anything too good in the location previously. So both of these end up having stealthy, so they're going to be forced to have to hit your very tanky Bile Blackheart, keeping these alive. And both of them have a 5% chance to insta-kill based with an additional 5% for every Doom Skull on the board. So a little bit higher insta-kill chance than the other ones, which have like a 4% and 3%, I believe, respectively. The Ultra Rare having 4% and the Rare having 3%, boosted by 3%. So both of these having a full 5% is pretty nice, so you have a little bit of extra insta-kill rate. It also helps bolster up your team bonus whenever running a team like this, which is also nice. You can even do 4 of them, of course, and just go with like the disease one or something in order to give you even more stats, but I personally feel like the double Blackheart ends up working out just a little bit better, just in case one of them dies, to have a backup plan, because otherwise the team is pretty weak if he does end up going down and you only have the other 3 remaining. As far as the Corsair class, we're basically just going all in on trying to get the Ruby weapon. With 20% extra stats, you definitely want to be running the Corsair class itself. We end up gaining a bunch of extra blue on it, while also having the Commodore end up offsetting us for even more blue mana. Just a new Glory trip that end up coming in today. Nothing really too noteworthy. She just deals some damage to an enemy and creates 3 booty gems. But hey, it's free gold whenever you're running a team like this. And we're mostly just using it for its water link anyway, so she's kind of just sitting there. Overall, pretty underwhelming Glory troop, but this is like a rare circumstance where she actually does get a little bit of value, as she'll give you a little bit extra gold while also giving the mana link you already needed anyway, so might as well get some extra free value from it. And then we're just using Empower into blue to go get all the blue off the ground, as well as maxing out the rest of the gold. And Captain McCall, of course, for the 50% mana start to all rogues, combined with all of our extra bonuses to get a bunch of extra stats. But unfortunately, no magic this time around. However, you know what we do gain magic 14 bonus-wise? Ghulvania Guild Wars! Of course, most of your teams for Ghulvania Guild War is going to be 4 times, well, obviously Ghulvania, but also 4 times Undead. This ends up giving a pretty substantial amount of magic and just stats in general, particularly in the HP category, But 11 magic with this much pet upgrades, obviously yours might be a little bit lower depending on what your kingdom upgrades are and everything, but it is a pretty substantial amount of magic, especially since every single thing in this location does true damage or lifesteal pretty much. So you end up getting a lot of value from that. The MVP of this entire guild war is definitely going to be Grey King. He was in Soulforge the other week. Hopefully you end up getting him. If not, you can definitely still do the guild war without him. However, it will be a lot easier with him, that's for sure. He destroys all gems of a chosen color and is destroyed, so you do get to keep all the mana accumulation from it. And then all enemies of that color get hit for a ton of true damage. And they are also mana drained, silenced, and frozen, which is really, really good. Basically gets rid of all their mana, any ability to go get more mana for a little while, and makes it so they can't really extra turn for a while. Is particularly good if the enemy team happens to be using a lot of the same color. If they have 3 or 4 of the same color, you just end up targeting that color and boom, you just get a ton of value immediately. But even teams that try to counter it, as long as they have a double color, like let's say, I don't know, 2 blue overlap and then the other 2 have like 2 purple overlap, you can just cast twice and end up disabling out the entire enemy team. More often than not, you want to be prioritizing blue, purple, and brown, or something else that mana accumulates pretty well in your team. In this case, since we're using Trick and Treat, we might also want to consider yellow, red, and purple a little bit more as well, with purple by far being the best one there. But yeah, you don't have to. You could just do it based on what you need to do on the enemy team, or you could even do it based on board control. If you know that hitting yellow, for example, will end up giving you a 4 times, 5 times extra turn from the cascade that you would end up doing from it, even if you don't necessarily need yellow mana, or even if it's only going to hit one enemy, it might still be worth doing just to end up getting the extra turn that you end up getting for, especially if it's a 5 times. But overall, yeah, it's definitely not that bad of a troop. Great option, going to be your main carry for pretty much the entire event. The other main carry, which is a little bit more budget, that you can also try for in Glory Gym chests these days, as well as VIP chests. I almost wanted to say event keys, but unfortunately no event keys. But yeah, Glory Gym go to VIP chests. It's in all those. Of course, it's not the exclusive thing in it. However, if you haven't picked up your Crimson Bat, you might want to, especially if you plan on buying the $5 pass thingy for the thing, because Crimson Bat is getting quite a bit of a buff. He used to be really strong back when the game first launched for the first couple of months. Then he kind of got nerfed into the ground multiple times over to kind of balance him out. But he's finally being brought back. With the shininess, he's going down to a 13 mana cost, where he was, of course, 15. I believe he has a pet that corresponds with him, I'm pretty sure. That's giving him 5 all extra stats if you happen to have it. So he's gaining that as well if you end up getting that in the pass. And on top of that, his shininess, I believe, is bleed all enemies, which of course was not a mechanic when the game launched, but is a mechanic that has come in the last couple years. So yeah, it has 4 times bleed. That ends up doing more and more true damage per turn as you end up stacking it, up to 10 damage to all enemies per turn once you get the 4 stack. So overall, not that bad. A lot of extra damage. One nice thing about the bleed as well is he has a trait that goes really well with it. He deals double skull damage to anything that's wounded. So let's say the enemy team has something that heals all allies, but you still have the bleed on them. So they're immediately going to tick down with bleed, so they're going to get re-damaged even if they full heal, unless they full heal and cleanse. But if they simply just full heal, you'll still be able to immediately go do the double damage with the bleed mechanic. And of course, while there probably aren't too many of these days, if the enemy team is divine related, the most notable one probably that I could see is Takshaka. It's going to be really good against Takshaka teams. So if you're up against Naga or divine layout in green, this is going to be pretty nice to go and counter those out this guild war, because he does double skull damage to divine for a stacking 4 times skull damage against divines that are damaged. So overall, not that bad. You can even put it in first slot if you really wanted to. Most teams probably aren't, because you probably care more about his casting than his skull damage. But if you're up against Takshaka team, might be worth moving him up to the front in a given situation to go get that potential up to 4 times extra skull damage there. And then Ghost Queen, going to be a pretty big staple. If you own this, you should be using it on pretty much every team for the Ghulvania event. Ghulvania is almost entirely undead, and this thing has 50% mana start to all undead allies. It's pretty important to end up having on your team. And of course, if you don't end up having it, you could end up trying in a Glory Gem Guild or VIP chest. If you went for the Mythic earlier this month, hopefully end up getting it along the way there as well. But it's not exclusive in drop table, but it's going to help out a ton if you end up getting it onto your team. As far as the mid-rarity team, we're running a Crimson Bat Ghost Queen once again, but offsetting with some other things. Undead Sentinel could technically be considered high rarity. It is a legendary though, so I am considering it in the legendary category here and not a mythic. Though as you guys know, if you've tried to get all 6 Sentinels, it is very annoying to do. However, if you happen to have the purple Sentinel, it's not that bad. Ends up exploding a column, gains a ton of life, and if the enemy is cursed, which they generally will be due to his final trait, He ends up creating 8 giant purple gems, which will end up giving you a ton of extra mana accumulation for purple. Ends up exploding everything around them when they end up getting matched. 8 of them is generally enough to potentially end up landing at least a 3, if not an extra turn, which is pretty nice as well. Has 50% score reduction, so it's going to be pretty tanky in that first slot. But its most notable thing is it Cursed Diseases an enemy whenever they end up taking a skull against you. So you basically want to bait out that skull so you can get the curse for this thing's boost ratio. But on top of that, you also get to deal double damage to cursed enemies, which of course it has synergy with off of its ability. And with 50% score reduction, you don't really have to worry about getting hit as much. Though it can be stunned pretty easily, which of course is going to be a lot of elementalists out there. On this mid-rarity team and a low-rarity team, we're all running elementalists ourselves just to counter out the enemy elementals. It just to have a little bit extra durability. Crimson Bats is going to be doing its normal things, as well as potentially any shininess that you end up getting across the event. And Ghost Queen once again doing the 50% mana start. Also has a little bit of a true damage poke, which is a little bit more relevant on this team. On the high-rated team, you're pretty much never casting it. But on the low-rated team, this would be pretty nice to doing cleanup kills. Also, similar to the other team, you can run Trick and Treat here, but I figured I'd show a different weapon, and that is Shadow Shot. Ends up draining all mana from an enemy. Since you don't have this off of Great King if you don't own Great King, this is your main other option to go and do that. So you can end up making sure that if they have some kind of very dangerous thing, like a Corsair, the Flower Dragon, you can end up countering it out, get that mana drain there, stuff like that. But ends up mana draining whatever you target, as well as dealing some damage to 2 random enemies, boosted by mana drain. The only big issue with this is it doesn't do true damage, but one upside is this is a purple storm, so it's really good synergy with any other purples you have, which of course Ghulvania has a ton of. And for the low-rated team, low-rarity is kind of scuffed this time around. However, you can definitely do it. There's a lot of true damage here, so you can still kind of build around true damage. We're doing the Axe of Leeching here. Not the greatest, but we'll end up creating a bunch of red and purple off of it to end up getting our mana accumulation. Corpse Mirror will also have a little bit of mana accumulation while having lifesteal. Every single thing on this team does end up having lifesteal. Has a blue link into itself so it can get its mana going a little bit quicker. Unfortunately, no score reduction though, but does get to end up getting the durability from its lifesteal, so it still has something for surviving. As far as our Deathclaw here, actually, you know what? I think it's better if we end up putting Hero here. Because I forgot, we don't have a resummon weapon. I think one reason I was kind of offsetting it because I was thinking, oh yeah, we could just resummon into first slot. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, when we end up getting the big wave of exploding weapons that they seem to have stopped, Ghulvania never got one. Exploding resummon weapon, there were a few that got left out. But Ghulvania is pretty notoriously one of them. So if you need a weapon like that, yeah, there's not really like a resummon weapon here. Or at least like, you know, one in that category. You generally just want to run like Trick or Treat or something similar, or of course if you have it. But as far as, no, I wanted. But as far as what we're doing here, we're doing Axe of Leeching. I guess now tanking with the Elemental as hero class, so we can Barrier on Brown, end up keep taking that over and over again so you don't end up dying out. We're using Corpse Mirror here to end up getting a little bit of mana accumulation, lifesteal. Pretty much the same reason you use it in Bounty Hunter, just really good overall. Deathclaw ends up stealing some life from an enemy as well. And then explodes 3 purple gems for some guaranteed mana accumulation, doing a little bit more than the Corpse Mirror, but having less control than the Corpse Mirror. One pretty noteworthy thing about it, though, is it does end up giving that magic link, so you do end up gaining a little bit more into its mana accumulation, as it does have a little bit of a higher mana cost, but also gets more of its mana back. And then we have Weird Bat, which you could probably be the first thing you'd want to replace on this team. However, it does have an interesting mechanic. There's a 50% chance to convert a purple gem to a Lycanthropy gem, which can convert things into beasts, but that's not the main reason you need it. Not for the Lycanthropy effect, but you need it for the Lycanthropy gem, oddly enough. It's stealing some life from an enemy, but the most noteworthy thing here is it inflicts a death mark to a random enemy for each Lycanthropy gem on the board. So if you can end up getting this to create 2-3 Lycanthropy gems, you're doing 2 or 3 death marks on the enemy team. And of course, if you have 4 Lycanthropy gems on the entire on the board, you would end up death marking the entire enemy team, which is definitely worthwhile in considering. Which is also one other thing I forgot to mention. We ran Death Knight class on the higher rarity team. One interesting thing about this, of course, is when it dies, you get to death mark all enemies. So your hero dying can actually be somewhat of a beneficial thing. You do lose a little bit of points for that and stuff, but as far as its death, it could end up speeding up the win of the battle, since you'll end up getting all those death marks. Of course, they might have immunes and stuff like that, but as long as you don't have immune, if nothing else, anything hit by Trick and Treat won't have immune. Though they're already going to be hit by death marks, so I guess that won't really matter in that regard. But assuming you don't have a ton of immune to it, you end up getting that death mark there. It's mostly being used for bolstering up the team bonuses, though, since this are automatically being 50%ed. But it is a little bit of an extra perk if your hero does go down and might end up taking another enemy down with it. But yeah, that's all the teams, all which will be in the description below if you want to go and copy paste any of them. And of course, we'll be streaming every single night for the Guild War as well, around 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or so. Beyond that, we mentioned Soulforge. Actually, did we mention Soulforge? I don't think we did yet. Overall, Soulforge, pretty underwhelming. There's pretty much not a single thing in any category that you'd want to get. There is one Ghulvania troop that's available in Soulforge, as far as a legend, not a mythic. It's not that good though. Ends up eliminating all armor from an enemy, deals a bunch of damage to all of them, enemies below them. Biggest issue with this is it's not true damage. If this was true damage, I would say yeah, it's probably worth getting and offsetting on a low rarity team. But because it's not true damage, you're better off just doing like what we just showed with the low rarity stuff and just run all in on a bunch of true damage options, because this is a little bit too physical heavy, as he only really technically does true damage to whatever his target is. So overall, just not really that good. Just really lacks that synergy within the kingdom. There's a better armor tier one that you could do for 12 mana cost instead of 16 if you really want to have armor tier on your team. That one brown purple knight that ends up doing it. So there's just not really any need to run this, but it is worth mentioning that I guess there is a targetable Ghulvania troop here instead of having to deal with the wide drop table. But yeah, really skippable for troops, and honestly very skippable for weapons. There's not really much here. I guess Captain's Cutlass, we showed this for one of the teams, is a rogue weapon that occasionally can have some use cases outside of Ghulvania. I mean, outside of Blackhawk event, I mean. But beyond that, yeah, there's just not really anything here that's worth going out of your way for. Well, unless you can scrap together the million souls for this and you have the 3 components already. It is not exclusive this week, but of course is very relevant, because even though none of the 3 components are from Blackhawk, the weapon itself is Blackhawk, which means it is pretty much your strongest option you have for both the weapon for the world event this week as well as for the underworld this week. So of course the same team that you end up running for both. There's not really any variance between them this time around. So yeah, a huge weapon to have if you want to speed through those game modes. So if you have all the components but don't have the million souls, might want to go scrap together a million souls sometime this week and go and craft yourself the weapon then to help out with everything else. As far as everything else, Tuesday we have the faction event for Blackheart. Wednesday we have one of the old what did I forget its name already? What did I forget its name? Blackhawk. Oh, I said the Blackheart. The other one is Blackheart. This one is Blackhawk. Gosh. Yes, Blackheart faction on Tuesday. Black Hawk. Gosh, why am I getting that so confused? Black Hawk troop on, or not troop, but pet on Wednesday. Thursday, this is the Corsair class. Generally not used too much outside the context of this week, but it's pretty noteworthy in that if you're using it in a 4x rogue team, you can end up 50% mana starting it with all the other rogues. And of course, it is the highest amount of blue you can ever get. It is +3 blue. The biggest downside of why you don't run this as often compared to something like Archmagus is Archmagus naturally has a 50% mana start attached to this, whereas this very noteworthily does not unless you have that 50% mana start all rogue troop on your team. So unless you're building a really rogue heavy team, you don't really bring this out as often compared to Archmagus, where you can run it like in every team ever and just have it as +3 purple. But this is +3 blue, but just a lot harder to end up incorporating into a team, unfortunately. So you tend to go down the purple route if you really want a lot of mana then, which is why this isn't really used as much, even though it's kind of similar, but the 50% mana start makes a huge difference in its viability in a negative sense. And then Friday, of course, or more so Thursday to Sunday, we have the Guild War event. As far as other things we have going on, I guess mostly just to mention PvP. So PvP, it's not the final week, but is the second to last week of the PvP. So if there is anything you want to go and finish up task-wise or anything else, make sure to do so. If there's any goals you still haven't completed, if there's a season pass, if you still want to get to a certain point. One other thing to consider too is getting 150,000 points. 150,000 allows you to go and save 800 diamonds in the future by getting Racuel here. But this guy over here is going to cost 800 diamonds in the future. He's not particularly useful, though maybe some kind of Diviner Knight or Sword's Edge team might end up incorporating him a little, especially if you're missing some other options. But yeah, he basically saves you needing to get 800 diamonds in the future. It does require getting 150k points, but of course you can go and spend all your idols if you haven't already, and just kind of grind PvP out a little bit if you're close enough to go and get it. I probably will, because after I use all these medals, I think we're only going to be like, what, 40-ish? 40,000 away? And 40,000 over the course of 2 weeks should be pretty doable, especially since Guild War this week's going to be bringing a little bit extra as well, since those do count for your VP for this system. And if you bought the pass, I think they even count double. But yeah, 150,000 to end up getting this, so it's basically free once you do. Silver marks are so in excess, and there's not really anything to dump them into, so getting a copy or two of this, probably just one since it's not really that needed, will end up saving you a little bit of diamonds in the future if you can scrap together that 150,000 points within the next 2 weeks, so worth considering. Not the final week of the PvP season, but if you want to go for that 150k grind, you might want to start this week if you haven't gotten, if you're still far away from getting to that objective. Beyond that, guild event we kind of already went over with the world event thingy, but it's basically just use these medals, end up giving you a ton of extra spell damage. Unfortunately, no skull damage. There are a few skull teams you could do, but because there's no extra skull damage, you basically are forced to have to go spell damage, which tends to happen a lot in world event, where you're basically dictated by whatever this is. So if it doesn't have skull damage, you basically have to build a spell-oriented team, which is why, of course, all the teams we end up showing were all cast-oriented and not skull-oriented at all, as you only end up having your extra magic damage. The only thing you really need to know here is just don't take the blue one, don't take the Knight Coronet, and as long as you take whatever the highest rarity is, just do it high rarity order and just go from there, leaving just the Knight Coronets till the end, and you'll be good to go as far as scoring for the world event. Beyond that, as far as the event key drop table, I would say it's pretty skippable, but its drop table is honestly not that bad. You might want to open a little bit to kind of help you out with some stuff this week if you don't already have a team composed for all of the various events. As far as things that are not in drop table, this includes the 5 faction troops from Blackheart. So that's only from throwing Chaos Shards at the Blackheart faction. Beyond that, the other things that are not in the drop table here includes... wait, that's actually it. Really? This place doesn't even have an Immortal. Oh, no, the Hanged Man. That's only in the Volky drop table. But, yeah, wow, that's not a lot. Only the Hangman Volky thing and the 5 troops from the faction. It's basically the bare minimum. Yeah, I didn't realize. This place doesn't have an Immortal. Weird. But as far as things that are in event key drop table that are potentially worth considering, Skylight used to be used for Bone Storm. For the most part, you don't really need that much these days. I would say the Empower options and the 50% Mana Start Rogue are the main things you want to look for that are easily obtainable. 50% Mana Start to all Rogue is basically required to make your Corsair hero class work, as it is a Rogue, of course, and needs that to function. Ends up having a little bit of a cool insta-kill as well if the enemy's running a bunch of Submerge, so he's even not that bad. As far as 50% Mana Start troops go, the biggest issue is Rogue teams kind of got nerfed pretty heavily when the 4x Rogue team with that one Shadow Queen, whatever her name was, ended up getting nerfed into the ground because of Rogue Spider ended up getting nerfed into the ground. So for the most part, Rogue teams aren't really ran that much outside the context of an event week like this, but maybe they'll make a comeback at some point, which requires really getting like 1 or 2 good Rogue mythics, and you could probably end up building a team out of it in the future once we just get those down the line, ever since the old team ended up getting pretty heavily nerfed. Beyond that, anything else you kind of want to pick up utility-wise? Yeah, pretty much nothing else. Just the empowers here. You have First Mate, which ends up getting used a little bit, as well as Scurvy Sea Dog. So beyond that, yeah, nothing really much here. There are, of course, the Mythic category. As far as Mythics are concerned, you're mostly looking for Megavore or Sycorax. The other two are okay. They're nothing really anything special. As far as what they do, you can definitely live without them. We have a 50-50 of getting something good, as Megavore is still the best way to armor tier in the entire game, having a 4x armor tier. There are some ways to kind of do it better in extra turn spamming, like with Rope Dart, where you can extra turn spam over and over and over again and keep getting armor tier after armor tier. But overall, if you're just looking to just one and done it, Megavore's still the way to go. And of course, has Impervious into insta-kill, which occasionally can just give you a free kill, which is nice. Beyond that, Sycorax is among one of the best mana accumulation mythics in the entire game. While it does have bolster a pretty high 25 mana cost, ends up doing exactly what the Trolls do for 12 mana cost, which might sound bad, but it gets to choose whatever color you want. So let's say, for example, we were running Forest Troll, which is brown-blue for only 12 mana cost. It always does it on green, which, of course, if you can maintain a nice, healthy amount of green on the board, then that's kind of nice. But what if green's not the highest anymore? What if you only have like 8 green left on the board and there's like 12 blue or something similar? That's where Sycorax ends up working out pretty well, because it has 3 colors that it can end up choosing. Technically 12, but you generally want to be prioritizing the 3 that it uses, so it goes back into itself. So instead of being focused on just green or just brown or just blue or just any other color, it could do any of the 6 with its focus being on the 3 that it ends up utilizing. So even though it bolsters a twice higher mana cost, or slightly more than twice up, it does get the extra benefit of creating more gems, since you can always target whatever the highest of the 3 is, rather than just always being forced to have to do whatever the same color is. Also, near the end of the battle, you could also go in for one of the other 3 colors if you just need to go and get your finisher down, if it just needs one of those colors. Normally, whatever your finishing option has overlap with them, but if it doesn't, you can end up doing that as well. Go into that. And, well, I haven't mentioned this yet either for any of the teams that were doing this. It also gets to gain a bunch of life. It is one of the best, if not the best way in the entire game, the life boost ratio, if you're using any kind of life boost ratio team. It's not really a meta in the game at the moment, because it's better to boost ratio off of magic or armor or literally anything that isn't life in the current state of the game. However, if there ever was to be a new mythic or a new legend that really makes life boost ratio viable, this would be the main thing you'd want to put in your team. You'd want to use this as your main mana accumulation option so you can get all that life going for the life boost ratio team. And also gets to give a little bit of extra benefit to all elementals while having Impervious. Not that bad. But yeah, you have a 50-50 of getting something good. You want to see Cyclops, Megavore, and the other 2 are basically doing nothing other than, I guess, offsetting for World Event or Underspire this week if you're lacking other damage. But yeah, you have a 50-50 of getting something good. Probably not worth going every way for, but yeah, it's not the worst thing in the world. You mostly just want to get all the other utilities at the lower rarity range, though. And beyond that, I guess the only other thing we have left to go over is the Glory Troop, which we actually saw a little bit briefly on one of the teams. Great time to stock up on blue-purple arcanes if you need them. Only 200 glory each effectively, since you get 2 per thing. And yeah, as far as the Commodore is concerned, nothing too special. Ends up dealing some damage to an enemy boosted by gold, and ends up creating a couple booty gems. There are way better things in this kingdom that end up boost ratioing from gold. So if you want a gold boost ratio damage troop, you're never using it for that. However, the main thing that you're using it for is Water Link. Ends up having Water Link, and while there are other alternatives, this can be used for things like the Thursday class event in order to go and just give you a little bit of extra blue to get everything rolling off the ground. But for the most part, it is pretty useless. Outside of a Thursday class event for a week like this, you are never going to be bringing this thing out ever. There are just better things in the kingdom that already do what she does, but better, just without the mana link. So unless you specifically need her for that mana link, you're just not really using her ever. And you would never use her outside the Blackhawk context, because there's way better mana accumulators out there and damage sources out there that can cover what she's already doing. But anyways, guys, I'll wrap it up for now. We will be back for, well, I guess tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when we go and just mess with all the weeklies. But yeah, we'll be back for every day of the Guild Wars. We'll go and mess with all that. Don't forget to go set your defend teams the next 2 days. If you're a guild leader or whoever has control over these, don't forget to go set your defend option. Honestly, because of Crimson Bat, I'm almost considering doing a different layout. It is slightly considering it. Just because, also the Undead Mirror would be kind of funny. But just because of the Crimson Bat kind of countering it out. Because of course, generally your team for Naga and Divine are going to be 4 times Divine. Naga because you're running Takshaka, and Divine because, well, obviously it's Divine. So that's going to be a little bit annoying, but of course you still have the strong Elemental, you still have the Goblin, you still have obviously your Keep as always. But I don't know, it should be fine. If nothing else, maybe adding a counter to that counter, because our Divine's a counter Undead. So you can kind of counter, since even though they're countering with Divine, you know, or countering your Divine with Crimson Bat, you can also have Divine that counters specifically Undead and kind of have a inverse situation where you're both countering out each other's teams. So there is that option. Naga doesn't really have too much of an alternative other than just make sure your Takshakas are in second or in your 3rd and 4th slot. This might even be a situation where you run like Elemental as hero class or something similar, because you don't want your Takshakas to be up front. Otherwise, they're just going to get devoured by Crimson Bat. Not literally, but, you know, 4 times skull damage is a lot of skull damage. Well, there isn't really that many ways to get extra attack in Ghulvania. 4 times skull damage is still very hefty to be able to do pretty much right off the bat. So just make sure when you put your Takshakas on your team for both of these 2 teams, but particularly for the Naga, keep it in like your 3rd and 4th slot, just so it's a little bit safer, so the Crimson Bat can't really reach them in that situation, and then you're good to go. But anyways, guys, I'll wrap it up for now. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave in the comment section below. All the teams that we went over earlier are in the description and pinned comment if you want to go and copy paste any of them. And I will catch you guys later. Goodbye, everyone. And thanks for watching.